Hello everyone, this is Hero. Welcome back to another Holy Paladin video. We're here in War Within 11.2 PTR, and I'm doing some Mythic raid testing for Plexus, Loom'ithar, and Naazindhri. I'm going to go to those clips in just a moment, but I want to show you the build that we're working with here. It's a Caster Paladin build, as I'm calling it. The distinctives, of course, being that we are going to use Flash of Light to build, and we're going to largely use Light of Dawn to spend in order to make use of really high Dawnlight uptime and healing. That's the synergy that we're getting out of our kit. We're playing with this 2-piece and 4-piece that's going to give us more Dawnlight healing overall. So the casting gameplay is pretty simple. We're pressing Holy Shocks, we're pressing Flash of Lights, and then we're spending with Light of Dawn. Included in this is the use of Beacon of Virtue to help amplify our healing, and we have more or less enough mana to make it through a fairly long encounter in this strategy. So first up is Plexus. This is the boss that has the wall, and what I'm doing just to stress test this in part is, in addition to doing the mechanics and healing people, I'm largely just trying to spam out my spenders, including making sure Virtue is cast more or less on cooldown. There were some pulls. I don't know how many pulls we did to test this. We would, stop at about 5%, like a lot of guilds, just to ensure that you had another chance to test the boss before you killed it. But in many of these pulls, I would, pause and do a little bit of spot healing as needed. But in large part, I think all of these encounters were tuned to be more or less reasonable in the healing checks. We had some times when we were doing 3 healing, sometimes 4, and then later on I think there was a 5 healing, not of this boss in particular, but in general. So you have a bit of a flavor of the throughput from each of those. I don't really know this guild, I'm just pugging to join them, but I think this is a great test because there was pretty good comms. We were in Discord for this, so they were calling things out throughout the day, but in general, pretty competent group, and there was good moments for showcasing the throughput of Holy Paladin using this spec. You can see here, this is kind of positionally agnostic, meaning it doesn't really matter where you are as a caster. You can do most of your throughput either from melee or even from range, and you'll see that in the pulls for Naazindhri, where I'm at a fair distance in some of the cases, and because of our talent choices, our Light of Dawn can strike nearly everybody, and because we're using Beacon of Virtue, we are fairly confident that we'll have high mastery value because the beacons will be spread out among the raid and therefore guarantee that we're getting pretty good value. The gameplay distinctive of casting Flash of Light has 2 pieces to it. You could use Crusader Strikes because they essentially cost the same mana, but Flash of Light has the added benefit of giving us a chance to get Silver Hand procs, which make our Holy Shocks do more. You can see here what we're often doing is just fishing for those procs or setting up for our small cooldowns like Divine Toll, or the Virtue windows themselves. You could be casting Eternal Flames fairly reasonably if you're focused on the raid frames too, but when I'm learning encounters, I don't always have the mental space to see both the raid frames and all of the nasty areas on the ground. So I'm kind of learning as I go as well. And I find this build is very friendly for people who are wanting to play a version of Paladin that isn't quite so difficult on your sight lines, on your attention. What I mean by that in part, as I'll show you in I think the last clip of Soulbinder Naazindhri, is you can actually do a focus macro with your skills, your Flash of Light, your Holy Shocks, and your Beacon of Virtue, so that it goes on, I don't know, the tank or even yourself if you like, it doesn't really matter. And you can get most of the value of your throughput out of that. Just have your target on the boss for casting Holy Prism, And you could have your mouse or your cursor pretty much anywhere you like and cast out most of these buttons and still, through Light of Dawn, push out a great deal of throughput. I think someone missed a soak there. So we get back up. This is after about, I don't know, 7 or 8 pulls of this boss where we'd stopped, and so I think we want to just make sure we killed him now. So we're going to do that. I do transition to do some EF casts instead of Light of Dawn because there's a smaller number of people, and that you just get more value out of it versus casting Light of Dawns in general. But yeah, just to that point, you can almost be targetless, more or less, and still get quite a lot of value out of this Caster Paladin version. And the reason for that is just how much of the value we get out of Light of Dawn, how much of our healing is, passively generated by producing a great number of spenders. Remember, using spenders is going to get Dawnlights out and Sun's Avatar. Those are ticking hots on your team, but they are also splashing healing to everyone around your team. 8% of Dawnlight's damage and healing radiating to nearby allies or enemies. So yes, it's reduced beyond 5 targets and doesn't transfer through beacon, but that healing, if you're casting as many Light of Dawns as I do, or EFs if you'd like, is going to produce a large number of Dawnlight casts, or Dawnlight ticking healing. And I, as I said, was basically pressing my buttons on CD. I wasn't really concerned. I just want to see, can this survive the mana? And it could. But as we move to Loom'ithar here, but it also has a great deal of throughput in Mythic. And the nice thing about Mythic testing, healing is not perfect. They'll probably tune these bosses to be a little more difficult. But when I look at the overhealing and how it compares to the other healers in the group, when you look, the raw throughput, I'm really satisfied that this is an approach that will do a lot of healing and has, if you like, a bit of spot healing approach, so you can devote more attention to it and really focus your EFs on people that are hurting. This is a good boss for that, by the way, Loom'ithar, because there's people who are soaking those little purple laser beams. And you would know for your team which people are soaking, so you could position yourself across the room. Your Light of Dawns could still hit everyone. Your beacons, you can see them going off in the distance, would still hit everyone, but you can spot heal and top people up. And the new buff to Flash of Light makes that spot healing or topping up really powerful for Paladin, and you can transfer that through your beacon. So it's just a nice mix of these abilities. You have on the one hand this really heavy raid healing that you're getting, just a constant flow of hots and throughput through Dawn of Light and Virtue that's being transferred. But then you have that paired together with fairly strong single target nukes or amps with Holy Shock that gets buffed, especially with Power of the Silver Hand, with EFs that are transferring, and then your Flash of Lights that get buffed. Now, your infusion procs are not as significant as Lightsmith. There's really way less because of the way that Lightsmith's kit is built. However, this build still functions fine, and you can use those juiced up Flash of Lights for Virtue windows. As I mentioned, I'm really just firing things off on CD, so I'm not even really playing around that. But that's the beauty, is I can look back at these logs, you can see the timings for things, and you can be more judicious instead of just blasting everything right away. The blasting it right away, by the way, didn't really impede our group from completing its goals or doing its checks or killing these bosses. And there's quite a few pulls here where people are testing and checking things out. You can always pivot to do spot healing at any moment with this build, and you'll be confident that you're getting good throughput. But I really like this simplicity that this build is offering. In this fight, you have 2 phases. One phase is where you're soaking and dealing with the threads that need to be killed to give a pathway. In the second phase, you're soaking this big cone, and slowly getting area denial from the boss as you fill up the room with this toxic sludge, this purple sludge that seems to go everywhere. So I like all the bosses we tested, and I just like how comfortable this felt. It's a really uncomplicated version of Holy Paladin. You're not impeded by being away from the boss, which is the one detraction I find for the AC version of Lightsmith in particular, is you just really feel bad in your wings if you get a mechanic. And as a healer, that's never a feeling I want to have. So I crafted this build to really be friendly to people who want something that's very accessible and simple, but still produces a great deal of throughput. And this one fit the bill. We are using things like Blessing of Summer really for the winter proc, though you could min-max that as well, get it on your DPS at the beginning, for example, get the cooldown on whoever needed it, including yourself if you'd like, making sure you get the Blessing of Winter to be mana ready. I think I pot a little bit late into this fight just because we're kind of checking things out. But you don't really need a lot of attention, and I probably overspent. You can almost always spam out Flash of Light just for an entire fight, and you'll never go so you always have a way to build holy power, even if you are And so much of the power in this is just tied into how many spenders you can produce per minute. So that was a good fight. I think we killed it the next pull, something like that, at 5%. Really good test there for Holy Paladin. Let's move on to Naazindhri. I really like this fight. This has a couple of interesting phases to it where you're trying to position everyone appropriately and avoid orbs that come flying through while using them to break out a bunch of adds. And in the middle portions of the fight, you break out quite a few adds, which, especially the mages, will put a really nasty ticking dot that can be dispelled in your team, but offered us a really good opportunity for some tests of throughput. So that'll come later, and I think classes like Mistweaver, Evoker are always going to be quite strong. Even I think Shaman will be pretty good at those throughput moments too. But I thought we held our own and really showed the power of this kind of a Holy Paladin style, which really doesn't matter where you are, but you just fire off your stuff. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I spent in this poll quite a few agnostic GCDs, meaning I wasn't really focused on topping anyone in particular. I was just pressing my buttons and they were hitting who they were hitting. So I kept my target on the boss for prison, but basically just fired off my stuff. And it was a nice test of just, does this actually do any throughput if we don't really mind who our Holy Shocks or our Flash of Lights go on? And the answer is yeah, it did. It did fine. You'll see here we started to get these big adds that will cast in this middle section, the dots coming out on people, and our throughput starts to spike. We're getting up there around the Mistweaver. This was consistent through a lot of polls. Just really had a lot of good answers for these big moments, including the capacity to have our own personal bubble. Obviously, you want to be dispelling people. I think you can mask this, or probably you can have a Mistweaver clear it off too. Lots of different ways for a team to deal with it. But just in terms of raw throughput, you can see here we're pushing up to 3.6, I think. And you'd have more, I think, when they tune this, and it's a little harder. But we're up there with the main throughput pushers. And this is with 5 healing, I believe. Yeah, we're 5 healing in this pull. So there's even more work to do. When I show you the overalls and the logs, you can see how much of this is just still overhealing for us, which for me is a great sign. Because if we're competing in a Mythic environment, I know the tuning's a little off, but if we're competing and doing pretty good and we still have significant overhealing, it means that we are supplying a great deal of throughput that isn't realized yet and can be realized if things go badly or if you need to pivot. So if you need to be more of a spot healer, you can forego pressing the Light of Dawns and focus your attention more on the unit frames and make sure that your team is getting topped by just spot healing every one of those spenders, which I'm producing a significant number of on people, and those are big, big heals, especially going into Beacon. Like Light of Dawn's fine into Beacon, but EF is really quite strong too. You can see here, we get, I think, down to the end, and then there's a call for us to pack it in so that we can get another pull on the boss, and we're still very comfortable. I don't think this will be a 5 heal fight. I suspect it'll be 4 healed and maybe, I don't know, maybe 3 healed. That depends on how they tune it, because people are really punching through. This is the real struggle point where you'd want your CDs laid out, your DRs and your bubbles and all that kind of stuff. But in general, really a compelling approach to Holy Paladin. That something really simple and straightforward that anyone can play. You can press your buttons, just making sure you're building and spending over and over again and not worrying too much about ordering everything. You can basically fire it off on CD and be pretty confident that you'll get good value out of everything you're doing. So that's a look at the gameplay. I'll just load up the logs here so you can have a look. I'll have 2 screens here. One is just the healing overall, and then I'll show you the casts so you can see the cast sequence for Holy Paladin in this environment. Here is the Plexus pull that was on screen for you. You can see where the majority of our healing is coming from. Dawnlight and Beacon of Light being the main pieces, and of course Light of Dawn, Holy Shocks, etc. The kinds of casts that you're producing, really, this is somewhat low, but I think it's because I also introduced a few EFs into this build near the end there. But you're looking at something like between 14 and 17 spenders per minute, Light of Dawn and EF. You've got about 3.5 to 4 casts of Beacon of Virtue per minute, and then around 10 Holy Shocks and around 10 Flash of Lights. These alternate back and forth depending on the different fights and some of the pulls and the RNG that you get from that. For Loom'ithar, the spider boss, we came in here with this kind of healing profile. And, oh, I forgot to show you the overhealing just so you can see. If I go back to healing here and show you what it looks like, you can see here we're punching out about 5.5 million. This went up to 6, I think, in some cases, raw throughput. So we are providing quite a bit against the field. I mean, there's other classes that can punch through a lot. I think the Mistweaver might have died on this early on this run, but they can do tons of healing too. But just so you can see that this is no slouch. Loom'ithar healing, again, in terms of where the healing's coming from, same story, Beacon of Light and Dawnlight punching through, followed closely by Light of Dawns and Holy Shocks, which I think we must have got some more Silver Hand procs. And then I also, I guess, cast 30 or so, maybe about half of them as EFs. So we'll look at the overall healing, and then I'll show you the casts. So when you look at the overhealing, again, you get a similar story, 5.8, so closer to 6 million raw HPS that we're pushing out with this build, which is pretty reasonable. The cast profile, this is a boss, again, that's going to have a bit of that single target throughput, the spot healing that I mentioned. So this is a bit more EF heavy, I would say, and you could probably spend more on EF than I did. I was just trying to spam out and get as much coverage as I could for Dawnlight, but this is a fairly similar pattern that you're seeing across these 3 pulls. Finally, the Naazindhri logs. Here you have, again, a 5 healing scenario, and like with the last ones, very similar pieces, Dawnlight, Shock, Light of Dawn, showing up and doing quite a lot of our throughput. You can see on the overhealing that we were able to produce about 6.1 million raw HPS, so doing pretty good compared to the Mistweaver, and the throughput from evokers is really quite strong. I will note, I think some people were using this trinket here, Twisted Mana Sprite, which is doing quite a lot of throughput. I think I used another trinket that did, oh, it's only about 5%. So the Loom'ithars is about half as effective, I think, for healers. Maybe this guy had it as well. Nope, he did not. So did our shaman have it? Nope, also did not have the trinket. So the trinkets give a little bit of variance here. The Twisted Mana Sprite is really quite strong. It might be overpowered. I think this one comes from Delve. I'm not sure, but that's producing 10% of this guy's throughput, which is great. On the casts for that one, this is again the build where I was basically, for the majority of it, just spamming the buttons, and I wasn't even really targeting anyone on my frames. I was just pressing the Holy Shock when it came off CD, firing off Light of Dawns when I had enough Holy Power, and more just spraying the group and pressing Virtue on CD, etc., etc. And you get this sort of a profile, more like 16 casts per minute of Light of Dawn. I think I exclusively pressed it just for that pull to test. Yeah, I don't think there's any EFs here. So spenders, you get about 16 casts per minute. Flash of Lights, more around 11. And Holy Shocks around 10. This is because we're fitting in Beacon of Virtues. Again, you can see we're getting close to 3.5 to 4 casts per minute of Virtue. So not too bad. That's a look, guys, at these builds. Again, the reason why I wanted to talk a little bit about this talent setup is I want an approach that is very easy and accessible, that doesn't have to be in melee if it doesn't need to be to perform its duties, has really, really strong spread healing, doesn't slouch when it comes to single target bombs or spot healing if needed. And it's really just enjoyable to play. Like, you get a great deal of value out of just firing off your stuff. It's got enough mana to just do it all the way through. It's a lot of fun. So if you have questions you'd like me to answer about this build or what I'm doing or how I'm playing it, or if you have comments in general, please let me know below. But other than that, I hope you guys are enjoying the PTR testing. I do look forward to a little bit more Mythic testing before we close out for this season. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time.